Well, welcome back to our training course, Opening Heaven's Door. And as I often say, the aim of this course is to help you become the very best you can be at prayer ministry. And as well as doing interviews with some people who are sort of kind of specialists in their field of healing, one thing we're also doing in this course is to look at some of the individual healing stories, some of the stories about Jesus and what he did. And the question we're asking is, what can these stories teach us as we take on that role of being ministers to other people in this whole area of healing? So in this session, the particular story we're going to look at comes from Mark chapter 1, and it's the story of Jesus healing a leper. Let's begin by hearing the story. A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Well, actually there are a number of things that strike me. 4 things actually strike me about this particular story. And the first is this: we need to encourage people to ask for prayer. I think there's a kind of an assumption a lot of people have that, God knows everything about them. He knows who they are, he knows where they are, he knows exactly what we're going through. And so if he wants to touch them, well, then he will. He knows my situation, he's got the power. If he wants to do it, he will. And if he doesn't want to do it, well, then presumably he won't. Now, of course, there is an element of truth in that. God does know about us. He could touch us at any time. But it's interesting, because as we read through the gospel accounts of people receiving healing from Jesus, for so many people, what prompts that healing at the very beginning is simply this: they ask. They ask him. Jesus seemed to respond to people who ask. So this man with leprosy, it's exactly the same. He approaches Jesus. And think about it. Leprosy was a horrible condition and very evident what was going on. I imagine Jesus could see this man had leprosy. And it's not just that Jesus goes up to him and says, "Oh, bless you, you obviously need healing, let me help you." It's up to that man to come to Jesus, to ask Jesus for the help and the mercy that he desperately needs. Jesus seems to respond not just to the man's condition, he responds to the man asking for help. And I wonder, and of course we don't know, but I sometimes wonder just how many other people did Jesus see? How many people did he pass by who were in great need? And for whatever reason, these people may not have, come forward and asked for prayer. And I wonder what happened to them. Maybe nothing happened. Because on this occasion, a man who was in need, he did ask. He took an enormous risk, actually, because you risk being shunned away, you risk being pushed away, you risk other people seeing you and making sure you don't get in contact with Jesus. But actually, what happened was his asking served as a catalyst for Jesus reaching out to touch him. And it just seems likely, of course we can't be sure, but it seems likely if he hadn't asked, well, maybe he would not have received. Now, where does that leave us in our involvement in this ministry? Well, actually, I think where it leaves us is this: we need to encourage people to ask. And it's not just, about them. There's something about the nature of Jesus, I think, that meant that people could approach him. And I think that one of the challenges we face, and it really is a challenge, is are we the sort of people that people will approach to ask for prayer? Yes, they can approach God, and yes, they would naturally approach Jesus, but we know that actually God largely works through other people. And he will largely bring healing through people like you and me, through prayer ministers. And therefore the asking is not just about them asking God, it's actually them coming to us. And they need to ask. There's a fascinating passage in James chapter 5. And it says this, is anyone among you in trouble? Well, let them pray. Is anyone happy? Let them sing songs of praise. Is anyone among you ill? Well, let them call the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. Something in that, it's interesting that those who are in trouble, whatever you define that, and those who are happy are encouraged to do something about themselves, to pray on their own. But those who are sick, it seems they may need someone to help them. Perhaps because it's harder to find God, your symptoms are screaming out to you perhaps, but they may need people to pray with them. And it may be us they need. And so let us be these approachable people. Now, of course, it's not just about how approachable we are when we're ministering. If you're standing at the front, it's not just about, do you look as if you're trustworthy? Actually, it's about the impression we give in the rest of our lives as well. Because I think don't just look at us when we're up there ministering. They look at us, just generally speaking, as they're talking to us over coffee or whatever it is. They're working out. Then are we the sort of person that they can trust, with their story, with their life, or with the life of somebody else? We need to be approachable, actually, and show we're approachable really in every aspect of our lives. And if there's a disconnect there, that can be a real problem sometimes. That's the first thing the story speaks about. It's the encouragement to ask. The second thing I think this story speaks about is the compassion of Jesus for those to whom he ministered. It's his compassion for those for whom we are praying. I think we need to catch that deep sense of his compassion. Why did Jesus heal this man? Well, because he asked, as we've been looking at, but also there was something else going on. There was this feeling inside Jesus. It's interesting, there are a number of different ways the translations put it. For some, they talk about him being indignant. Some talk about his compassion. And I love that sense of the emotion of Jesus for those to whom he ministers. You see, when people are seeking healing, I think very often they're going through a kind of a process, do I qualify to be healed? Do I pray enough? Do I fast enough? Do I give enough? Am I good enough? And by and large, I think we often, if you're seeking prayer, we go back and we start thinking about all the sins we've committed. And we end up thinking, well, why would God touch me? I wouldn't touch me. Why would God bother to touch me? Because I don't sense I'm good enough for God to touch. Of course, if we go through that process, or if other people do, what they're doing, of course, is they're putting the focus very much upon themselves. Do they qualify for the touch of God? I think one thing we can be doing is pointing people, not to themselves, but to the incredible love of God, the incredible emotion that God has for them. One of the things that we've been learning to do here at the Mission is that before we pray for anyone, we seek to let them rest in the love of God. We want people to catch something of the incredible love that God has for them. And I think actually a lot of the time people need some help catching his love. Because I think it's very easy to think, well, God loves everybody in the world apart from me. And I think one of the great things we can do as prayer ministers is to bring people to the love of God, to resting in that sense of his love. And what we do here, it's not just about telling people that they are loved, but it's actually consciously taking time to worship the Father. For this person when they're there, to be standing by them and we are worshipping the Father, creating that setting where they begin to rest and relax in the truth that they are loved by God, that the Father immensely loves the one for whom we are praying. And, what I often think is that, if we don't do that, if we kind of bypass that, or we miss that bit out, then I think it's so easy for people to approach prayer, all the time thinking, am I worthy? Am I worthy? Does he love me? Would he touch me? But if at the very beginning of that process of prayer, we can, as we minister, let them catch the truth that they are loved. And it sinks, not just from here, but into their heart. They can catch that. I think the person receiving is in a much more open state to receive more of what God has for them. And it's not that God won't touch them if they don't catch his love, but I think this person for whom we're praying, they begin to be much more open to the wonder and the possibility of what God could do for them. Third thing this story says to me as well is I think one of the main things that we can do is that we can bring people to Jesus. The healing stories, as you look through the Gospels, they reveal several ways in which Jesus brought healing. Sometimes he touched them, and it's like power seems to be released through his touch. Sometimes they're healed because he speaks to them, and sickness seems to respond to the word of Jesus. Well, in this story, actually, we see both happening. Jesus touches him, and he gives his command, be clean. And because these various ways that Jesus uses to bring healing to people, it strikes me, I think, that the key thing in ministry is this. It's not what we do, but in the sense of do we touch, do we speak, what do we say, how do we touch? But it's more like this. Our key role is to bring people to Jesus, to bring people into his presence. What do they want to say to him? What does he want to say to them? How he does it, it's entirely up to him. And I think it's so easy for us to get kind of caught up into thinking that people ought to respond in a certain way. Have they repented as we think they ought to repent? Do they believe the same things that we believe? And I think we're often looking for ministry to go in a certain direction. And once they do X, Y, and Z, then healing will naturally flow. It doesn't work like that. And I think that our role is to simply bring people into the presence of Jesus. Let's see what it is they want to bring to him. Let's see what it is he wants to say to them, what he wants to do to them. In a sense, we don't get to control the ministry. We simply bring folk to him. And again, at the mission, we've learned to do this. And when we're ministering, I love to ask people this question. When folk have bathed in the Father's love, I love to ask them, where is Jesus for you right now? And what we find is that question just helps people focus on something of the reality of the presence of Jesus for them. Because I want them to connect with his presence, to have something of that awareness that he is here. It's not just about them and me, but Jesus is standing right there as well. That's what I'm longing for them to catch, to find the one that is actually there for them. Because it strikes me that if I can do that, if I can bring them into that very presence of Jesus, if they have that awareness, whether they sense it or whether it's just not just, but it's a real faith issue that he's there, then I think again they're able to open up their hearts more to the real possibility of him doing something. Why wouldn't he do something? He's there. And I think for a lot of people, what they often sense is, well, let's give this prayer thing a shot. It may not work. It doesn't normally work for me, but you can have a go if you want to. But if folk can catch that reality of Jesus being there for them, then I think there's so much more possibility that he will do something. Even if it's not exactly what they want to happen, he will do something in that time. Now the final thing that this story speaks about is a confidence in the authority of Jesus. I'm very struck by, what happens in this story is that Jesus commands the man's body to be clean. It's quite amazing, isn't it? The idea of Jesus giving a command and something happening says something very powerful about the actual authority of Jesus. That he could speak a word. And if you like, the leprosy has to obey that word. What this says to me is this. If that leprosy took the word of Jesus so seriously, how seriously do I take the words of Jesus, especially as I'm ministering to somebody else? You see, I think one of the things that we're called to be is we're called to bring, to ministry a certain amount of faith and expectation. Because the person for whom we're praying, they may not have much. They've been living with a condition for a long time. They may not have much expectation or faith of what God could do. They might have just enough to ask for prayer. But I think it's up to us to bring into that situation something of a faith and expectation of what God could do. I think for us, that begins by us taking his words seriously. The way that I do this for myself is I often come back to these words, and I find myself, in a sense, bringing these words to a ministry situation. These words of Jesus, I have come that they may have life and have it in its fullness. Jesus came to bring to this person fullness of life. And I often find myself saying those words just before I pray. And it's, I suppose, not in a sense to remind Jesus about it, because he's well aware of it, but to remind myself and to remind this person of the mission of Jesus to them is to bring them the fullness of life. And by and large, I think, those who come for ministry are coming because they're not experiencing that life in its fullness. That fullness is lacking in a particular area, maybe in many areas of their lives, actually. So in my mind, what I'm trying to do is seeking to apply that promise, that mission of Jesus to them. Jesus, you came that this person might have abundant life. Not just dream about abundant life, not just have it spoken about and then not delivered, but they might actually have it in I think, every area of their lives. And so the question I have to keep back to myself is this: how seriously do I take those words? Do I really believe Jesus meant it for this person when he spoke it? Did he mean it for them? Well, yes, I think he did, actually. It's not his desire that we go through life crippled and damaged, whether our bodies, our emotions, our minds, our spirits. He takes no pleasure in our sickness in any of these areas. And I find that as I let those words sink into me as a minister, as I find the truth of those words, my confidence to pray for them vastly increases, because I catch something of his incredible mission that is for this person for whom I am praying. This is what he wants for them. This is his heartfelt desire for the person of whom I am praying. He wants them to lead this ministry time different from how they came into it. Now, it may not be, as I often say, in the very area they come for prayer for, because I do think that Jesus does have his agenda for our transformation. And sometimes his agenda for my transformation might be different from mine. We've often spoken about this. I want to do this, in this order. I think he wants to change me, transform me totally. Maybe. Sometimes he wants to do something else first before he gets around to the thing that I think is so desperately important. Well, I hope that's been helpful to you. I find this story of this Jesus healing this leper such a powerful story in what it shares with us and what it can help us bring to any situation when we're ministering to others. It's a real privilege, actually, that we have to respond to people who want prayer. It's a responsibility as well. It's not just a casual thing, oh yeah, well, let's give it a go and see what happens. No, we're bringing something to it. We're bringing, actually, the whole sense of the love of God and the presence of Jesus to that situation. And we can see real change happening as the power of the Spirit flows into that session. Well, do please go to our website, healingmission.org. And again, there you'll find details there of how you can register for this course. It's totally free, but what you'll find if you register is you get access to other things. And one of the things we try and give out to folk that register is every month just some questions. They're not for us to mark you, but questions to help you reflect on the ministry. I think so often we go through life and we minister and we keep ministering without really reflecting on what we are doing. How are we finding it? Are there some things we're finding difficult, some things we're finding not so difficult? Are there some things that challenge us? Are there some things that hurt us, that touch us personally as we're ministering? And over the course of the months, these questions are just there to help you discover something about how you can grow in this glorious ministry of healing. So bless you. Keep close to him. Keep close to Jesus as you're ministering. It's not something we do just because we're on a rota to do it. We do it because I think we're drawn by his compassion for the people for whom we are praying. So keep close to him and let's see what he can do through us.